It's Sciandra's Saturday Night Special. Tonight's guest, Liz Callahan.
Hi there, and welcome to my Saturday Night Special. Tonight I chat with Liz Callahan, Senior Program Director for Buffalo Manufacturing Works. We discuss manufacturing, the supply chain, and the skills gap. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching. Okay, so Liz Callahan, Elizabeth Callahan. Do you prefer Liz or Elizabeth?
Liz.
Liz, okay, you're a Liz.
Yes.
Liz, you are the Senior Program Director for Buffalo Manufacturing Works, and you want to talk to people about what that is, explain a little bit about what it is you do and who Buffalo Manufacturing Works are?
Sure. So Buffalo Manufacturing Works is the Buffalo office of EWI. We opened 5 years ago as a research and development resource for manufacturers. We wanted to have a home for that here in Buffalo, as you know, manufacturing is one of our top economic drivers, but we do work with customers and manufacturers throughout the country and even throughout the world. In my role, I specifically focus on some economic development work around small and medium-sized manufacturers in Western New York, which includes the 5 counties, and now growing that to other parts of New York State and the country, focusing on manufacturers under 500 employees.
Very good. Now, can you explain a little bit about EWI?
Yeah, so EWI is 35 years old. It is a manufacturing research and development firm. It's a nonprofit organization, started as the Edison Welding Institute. So we have expertise in welding, joint forming, and then here in Buffalo, additive manufacturing, advanced automation, and then in our Colorado office and Buffalo office, non-destructive testing and evaluation, so CT, things like that. Some materials experts in Ohio, really covering all sorts of new advanced technologies on the research side, but specifically focused on how manufacturers can actually implement those. So our customers are all manufacturers, generally looking to take technologies that they've seen in academia or that they've heard about, and how can they start to implement them into actual working manufacturing floors.
Now, is this a consulting firm, or is this kind of like a not-for-profit? Because it sounds to me almost like a chamber of commerce with an R&D, a research and development sort of program for manufacturing.
So we have an interesting business model focused on research and development, but then we also have a consulting advisory service arm that focuses on helping manufacturers prepare for technology. So we are fully technology and research based, but as we've grown and seen that, it's great to do that research, and with our large manufacturers and our consortia, we also need to bridge the gap for manufacturers who maybe haven't traditionally been involved in high-level cutting-edge R&D. How do they go from the technology of today or even yesterday to the technology that's coming down the pike very quickly?
And this is just to make sure that these manufacturers, that they don't lose any market share, they don't lose any step, but that they can scale up, or that they can remain competitive, because this is basically the life force, the job life force of the region. People's livelihoods are connected to the well-being of these businesses, right?
Yeah, manufacturing has one of the highest economic multipliers as an industry. So for every dollar we invest in manufacturing, depending on what part of the country you're in and some other factors, you're looking at getting anywhere between $1.50 to $1.80 return on that investment, based on the impact that it has in jobs, in exports, and things of that nature. We want these manufacturers to be competitive on a global scale, especially when you think about small and medium-sized manufacturers who in places like Buffalo can make up 90+% of your manufacturing base. And you're again talking about those 50-person companies, those 10-person shops, 100 people up to 200, 300, 400 people. Some of these companies have been part of our community for 100 years and have survived a lot of ups and downs. So how can we make sure that they have access to the resources to stay competitive and to grow in this global economy?
When you talk about these small to medium sized manufacturing outfits, is it fair to say that you typically work in conjunction with like tool and die shops, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we really don't limit ourselves. We've worked with a lot of tool and die shops, but we also work with food manufacturers. You know, you think about all of you think about your local Costanzas and Perry's and all of those things. Some of those are larger on the scale of what we're looking at, but they are still small to medium-sized manufacturers. You're looking at people who are in the aerospace supply chain, who are in the automotive supply chain, companies that are even startups. And so we've worked with a lot of startups who are a few people trying to keep their manufacturing local or starting to build up a new manufacturing base. We have worked, I think, with almost every industry at this point now, both through the program Shift that runs underneath my umbrella, as well as EWI and Buffalo Manufacturing Works as a whole. So yeah, everything from an 8-person job shop in sort of a corner in Lackawanna to 500-person medical device company that is looking to grow.
Well, I'm sure that they're all appreciative of the help. Now, can I ask what brought you to this part of the career path? Have you always been interested in like manufacturing, or I guess even logistics?
Yeah, so I have a very weird career path. I started off after college in retail, running stores, managing stores, and then got into recruiting for travel nurses, which is a fun industry that I'm happy to always talk about. It's something people don't really know we've got a ton of.
Is that kind of like Doctors Without Borders, except in like the nursing? Profession?
It's all throughout the country. Nurses have to have licenses in different states. Some states have compact licenses. And then when a hospital has a shortage for whatever reason, they are bringing in a new technology, they have somebody going out on maternity leave. I know a lot of travel nurses were the people who stepped up and went down to New York City and things like that. They take these short-term contracts anywhere from 13 weeks to a year, travel outside of their home, work in different parts of the state and country. And so my role at that point was finding these nurses, connecting them with the jobs, and making sure that their compliance was up to date, that they had a job to go to, and that the hospitals that needed the assistance were able to find the nurses with the expertise. And so I did that for a few years. But simultaneously, I was working with a small nonprofit called B Team Buffalo. Mm-hmm. Is a group of young professionals. They're still active in Buffalo, focused on helping young professionals find ways to volunteer and give back to their community. And so was involved in that for a few years, and that really connected me to a lot of things around both those jobs, around workforce and finding talent and working with young professionals who are looking to grow their career, which led me to the Buffalo Niagara Partnership, which is our regional chamber of commerce. And I was there for a few years as their director of workforce, and ran all of their workforce young professional training and education programs. And in that time, I worked with a lot of manufacturers. And if you've ever toured a manufacturing floor, and it's always very exciting. If you haven't, I recommend seeing if they will let you come in and do it. We've got some really cool things that are made here in the region, and really got to see firsthand a lot of the challenges that they were facing when it came both to workforce, but then also technology, keeping up with the pace of change and all of those things. And that's what brought me into Buffalo Manufacturing Works just about 3 years ago to start running the Shift program and now their full economic development arm moving forward. So a lot of twists and turns in my career, but really passionate about the region and making sure that we stay competitive as a region. And up until this point, really felt the momentum of everything that was happening in Buffalo, and really wanting to see manufacturing be a big part of that. And now, how can we support everyone through the challenges that we're facing today?
Wow, well, it seems like you've been everywhere and you've done just about everything. But to me, it sounds like you're, how do I put it? You exist almost in a coaching or a facilitator capacity. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, a lot of my career has been convening. So bringing people together, bringing disparate parties together to find where their common ground is. So when you think about my work at the partnership, a lot of that was bringing employers together with nonprofits, government employees, people who wanted to see the region succeed and say, okay, what are we looking for? What is the need? And where can we find common ground for a solution? So a lot of convening, a lot of coaching, teaching strategic planning, helping businesses, doing assessments and things of that nature.
Do you think that maybe you have an ability to read the layout, read the landscape, and sort of see who needs what and who can be helped from one another? You know what I mean? Connecting these disparate pieces that might not seem as intuitive or might not seem as natural to somebody else. You know what I mean? I get the impression that you're kind of like a field general in a sense, trying to get supply lines to troops and trying to make the toughest army available. What do you say to that?
Yeah, no, I'll take that. I think a lot of it is, I go back to, when I worked in retail, and you were always recruiting, especially when I worked in some larger stores, and they talked about being like the mayor of the mall and knowing what was going on and who was where and who was hiring and what was happening, and then taking that into the rest of my life of just getting to know people, what their needs were, what their interests are, so that then when you hear common words come up later, you can say, oh, let me introduce you to this person and make those connections. But also in my current role, I have a really great team who helps me do that and who helps me build trust with manufacturers and with our customers, and then with the other parties that we're working with. I think trust building is a really underrated skill and a really underrated need when it comes to working with other businesses and organizations who may feel like you're competing with them, or what are you trying to do, and stay in your lane, but how can you work together even if you are competitors? How can you bring people together? There's going to be some places where you have strengths and they have weaknesses, or they have strengths that are something that you're not great at. So how do you build that trust to know we're all on the same page and we're all in this together? I think especially when you're not in the private sector and you're working with a private sector business, or you're a salesperson, it's a lot of, oh, they're coming to sell to us, they're coming to just tell us what we need and not listen. And I like to start from a place of like, where are you coming from? Mm-hmm. What are your current problems? And then solving, instead of sort of always being a hammer looking for a nail.
Do you find that you are scoping out potential shops that need your help, or do you find that people come to you more often than not?
I think a little bit of both. When we first launched the Shift program, we definitely were going out and looking for people and saying, we have this new offering. This is what we can do for you. And then once you build up some of that sort of, again, trust and brand awareness and things like that, you get a combination of people coming to you and either ready to go, or even just coming to you and saying, I don't fully understand what you do. Explain it to me. Let's have that conversation. We're having some conversations with manufacturers in the Binghamton area right now. And it is a lot of that of, we've heard enough about you to know that we're interested, but we still don't fully understand what you do. But being able to use our partners in the manufacturing extension partnership there and the other people we've worked with to help us build those relationships takes you from sort of that interest to really building something that's real.
Now, just you had mentioned Binghamton. The thing that comes to mind immediately is in Vestal. Is it Boeing that's there? Is this who you're dealing with, or are you not able to say?
I can't say that that's not who I'm dealing with. Unfortunately, I can't say who I'm dealing with, but I am at the moment in Binghamton working more with small manufacturers. So not on the level of like a Boeing or a Lockheed or things of that, but some really interesting people that are a little bit smaller, and that are, I think they're an interesting case of their small manufacturers really being involved in their community and their economic development work. And it's kind of similar to what we have going on here in Buffalo, which makes it fun to go out there.
Are you underwritten by the Buffalo Billion?
So for two things, our first opening for Buffalo Manufacturing Works was given startup money by the first Buffalo Billion. And then when we launched the Shift program to support small and medium-sized manufacturers, that was given a grant by the second round of the Buffalo Billion to launch that program, as well as some of our workforce work. So we are invested in by New York State. They're a great partner of ours when we talk about how can we help manufacturers succeed. We're co-located in the new Northland campus with the Northland Workforce Training Center, the Buffalo Niagara Manufacturing Alliance, and Insight Consulting, who's our regional manufacturing extension partnership. So all of that is the vision, 5 years ago, from New York State, saying we want to build this manufacturing campus where manufacturers can go and have access to all of the supports that they would need to grow. And we're all under one roof now and sort of building that.
Now, assuming that manufacturing becomes what the state wants it to Do you see that your entity is going to transition into something else? Do you think that they will just attempt to replicate the program in other parts of the state? Is that the overall mission, is to make New York State a manufacturing powerhouse?
Yes, and so the state's mission, investing in Buffalo Manufacturing Works, was to support the manufacturers both of Buffalo and also to show off our technology and talent that we have here. When you think about what we're doing with UB and their research and the School of Engineering and all of the talent and expertise that we have that we partner with often. But EWI is, again, a national company or a national non-for-profit. So when we look at what we've done with the SHIFT program and with small manufacturers, we're also thinking about how can we take some of the things that we've learned here in Buffalo into other regions. It'll never, I think, be exactly the same. Another brick and mortar, all of those things that come with it. Every region's a little different in their needs and what their manufacturing base looks like. But what can we take that we've learned specifically about this cohort of under 500 employee manufacturers who are looking to be more competitive, who are a major part of our supply chain? What do they need to be more competitive, both here locally, but then also throughout the country and as you look globally?
Is the goal to have manufacturing jobs that are largely low education? And when I say low education, I don't mean low intelligence, so we can get that out of our mind. but this idea that, like, Donald Trump ran on and President Obama ran on, that we need certain jobs that people can have out of high school and that don't require college degree, that not everybody wants to go to college. Some people want to just make an honest living. Is the idea that these are jobs that people can get their rudimentary training in and just join the workforce and be productive members of society? Or are we talking about jobs that are maybe a little bit more skilled, like on the engineer level?
So I think you're talking about both. And it's not, yes, you're always going to have jobs where you don't need a traditional 4-year college degree. You need a 1-year program, a 2-year program, an apprenticeship, on the job training. But the great thing about manufacturing jobs is that a lot of them have a very high ceiling. And so you can really decide where you go with that. So you may start as an entry level, right out of high school, learning a trade, do an apprenticeship, work your way up, go back to school for engineering, go back to school for business and end up running the office, running the plant floor, being a project manager, all of those things. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth in the manufacturing industry. And I think, we don't want to limit it to just that there are these entry-level jobs. As technology advances, you need people who know the technology, can grow with it, and can learn it. And can be excited about that and think critically about what's happening while they're making some of these very complex parts. So yes, you're looking at jobs that right out of high school people can be making a living wage in a lot of cases, especially here in Western New York. But you're also looking at roles where people can grow within the organization and make a career for themselves, go back to school, decide how they want to do things in a non-traditional way. I think for a long time, people were pushed towards, you finish high school, you finish your 4 years of college in 4 years, and then you will do things. And that doesn't have to be the case. You can finish high school, work for a while, go back, go to a trade school, go to a community college, build a bunch of different credentials. I know now a lot of people, self-included, are taking Coursera courses and building up their credentials online, that it doesn't look the same as it may have 10, 15, 20 years ago. But you're taking the same ladder and at the same time working, earning a living, supporting a family while you're doing that and learning more about the trade that you're in.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to have, not necessarily a traditional track, or I suppose they could have a traditional track if they want, but at the very least there's a trajectory that they could follow if they wish. I think the time was you could go to like Bethlehem Steel, or you could go to the Ford plant, and you start at 18 years old, and you could work there until retirement if you want, or you could work there until you decide to do something else. If you want to do your own tool and die shop, if you want to start a landscape business or whatever, You could sell cigarettes to kids outside of the Dollar General. I don't judge, but I think that what would you call it, the livelihood or the quality of life that people need in a community is commensurate with what's available to them in order to feed their family or to keep a roof over their head. And in times past, maybe manufacturing could be sort of like a cage or a prison for certain people that they didn't have any way out. I mean, we hear about a mill closing or a factory closing, and there goes the town. And it sounds like you're attempting to get manufacturing firing on all cylinders for Western New York. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think that's fair of any robust economy. So if you look at, what economic developers are trying to do in any region is to make it so that your economy is not based in one thing or place. If one part of your economy is failing, another part can pick it up. So if you're a fully tourism-based economy and you don't have any manufacturing or any logistics or things like that, what's your plan in this current situation where tourism is way down and there's nothing else to depend on? It's the same thing if you look at manufacturing as a whole. Right now, aerospace, obviously, and oil and gas are in a tumultuous time. But when you look at things like food processing, as well as some of our other tool and die or companies that have been able to pivot into medical devices and PPE, they're surviving. They, in some cases, are even thriving and are finding new opportunities.
Right.
So you want to have an economy that's not tied to one building or person.
Yeah. Sorry to just interrupt real quickly. Yeah. I think we just hear about it so often, and it's become a completely anesthetized phrase, like diversity. If you can diversify, there is some health in it. And as you said, you pointed out rightly that if you're purely a travel town, how do you operate? And this is a conversation I have with my wife and my friends all the time, that communities need to be able to work on the most basic level. That if a community is purely residential and they all leave to go someplace else to work, to do their banking, to get their health care, is it fair to say that this is a community, A? Or is do you get what I mean? Like, we have to be sufficient. We have to gas our own engines. We have to put the wind in our own sails to a certain extent. And I'm so heartened to hear that these businesses here have been able to pivot in some cases.
Yeah, and if you look at going back a few years at the Regional Economic Development Council's plan for Buffalo, it wasn't one industry. I'll talk about manufacturing all day because I think it's fascinating.
You won't.
And no, I've been really fun at parties and super fun at parties.
You used to be.
Yeah, not anymore.
Okay.
I'm just like, let me tell you about steel pouring. But if you look at, what they built out, it was a plan that involved logistics and transportation, professional services, manufacturing, tourism, entrepreneurship and technology, so that, you had a diverse economy and you had skills that were transferable and you were exciting to more than one type of industry to try to build that out. It's not easy to do, but I think it's important that New York State and that the Western New York region recognize the importance of, yes, we have farm and agriculture, and that's something we need to invest in and continue to do. We have manufacturing backbone. So where do we have these resources and strengths, and how do we leverage those strengths for those the opportunities that are out there?
I mean, even Los Angeles, a lot of people don't know about this, but Los Angeles people think it's purely show business and that sort of thing. They don't realize the amount of garment manufacturing that exists in Los Angeles. It's an actual industrial center, and you have to be able to take a punch financially or economically, because if we're about to head into a recession, we're going to see very quickly what communities work and what communities do not.
Yeah, LA is actually they've got a really interesting model when it comes to workforce, and their chamber is really involved in it. You would think all sort of entertainment, arts and culturals, but everything that surrounds that is also out there. They've got an industrial center. They have a strong manufacturing base. New York City is similar. Yes, their manufacturing does not look like manufacturing in Buffalo because they have space concerns, but they have a lot of entrepreneurship. They have a lot of garment manufacturing, metals. They're doing some really interesting things in additive manufacturing. And so making it work in a situation where Here we have struggles around workforce and technology. In New York, they have, a lot of struggles around space, and you don't have the large sprawling factory floors that we may have out here that are historical to the region. So you want to build something. I think what governments and what economic development agencies attempt to do is say, where do we already have strengths, what's being built, and how do we support those companies that are growing and those industries that are growing. And so you look at programs like what's happening with 43 North, like what's happened at the medical campus, like the investments that have to happen in health and life sciences and all of those things, so that we can continue to be competitive and seeing those sparks of something and then giving them the resources to grow. I think of what the mayor has done around revitalizing downtown and bringing retail into Main Street and all of those things to support our tourism districts and things of that nature. We want it to be competitive on multiple fronts, because we know we're never going to win on one thing. You need to have a variety of eggs in your basket and cards to play.
There's so much I want to ask you just from what you just said over the last 2 minutes. So I guess I'll just stick with a couple. You had mentioned that some of our concerns with Buffalo or Western New York greater area versus New York City, our concerns are largely personnel. Do I see an opportunity to talk about the skills gap, or do you?
Yeah, and I think if you look at Western New York, our biggest issue...
Well, sorry, real quickly, do you want to explain to people what the skills gap is?
Sure. So depending on who you ask, the skills gap can mean a lot of things, but generally in the workforce world, it means that we have a series of jobs and job titles that need certain skills or education levels. We have a bunch of people who are looking for work who don't have the skills to match those jobs. And how do we bridge that gap? How do we get these people over here who are looking for either new jobs or jobs in general, students, incumbent workers, all of that, into the jobs, and what are the skills and talents that they need to get there? I think here, historically, we've had population drop. And so you're looking at both a sort of skills and ability gap, and then also just not enough people staying in the region, people moving away, and also not moving into the region. So we've done a lot on that over the last few years, starting to see people come back, starting to hear anecdotally that there is some growth. We had some really strong growth over a few years when it came to bringing in and resettling refugees and all of those things, helping our population growth. On the other side of that, it's really looking at what jobs are we training for when it comes to actual training programs, and what do employers do to find the right people and to communicate what they need. So if you know that technologies are changing and you need a higher skill to work on those things, how do you communicate that to career and technical ed schools to make sure that they're getting people the right certificates? How do you communicate that to a board of regents or to a licensing board to make sure that they're up to date on what you're looking for? How can people partner with their community colleges and their local state colleges to make sure that they're communicating what they need? And also then getting students excited about different careers. So health sciences and manufacturing are two that come up about getting people excited, because manufacturing has a history of dirty, dull, and dangerous. People don't want to do that. The parents don't want their kids to get into manufacturing. And so it takes a lot to break those walls down and say, it's not dirty, dull, and dangerous anymore. There's a lot of opportunity. There's room for growth. These are good paying jobs. These aren't sort of dead end jobs. These can be long-term careers. And this is where you can go with that skill set. And then health sciences, I think people just think doctor or nurse. And if you aren't interested in drawing blood or working with people, what would you do? And not really knowing all of the opportunity you have when it comes to research and studying things like epidemiology, and is a great example for right now. But also, what can you do in phlebotomy? What can you do in support services and respiratory therapy? All of those things that are needed. And how do you expose students to all of their options earlier? Because we hear a lot, people a few years out of high school or college going back to school to get into these careers where we need people, because they just didn't even know it was an option. So making sure people know what's out there so that they can get the right skills at the right time, and then making sure that the training and the opportunities that we have match what people are looking for.
Yeah, so When you had mentioned population loss and population gain and the uptick we had with resettlement of refugees and people like that, do you find that there's a sort of connection between those populations and those seeking jobs in manufacturing? I mean, I guess a roundabout way, are refugees or new immigrants to Western New York, are they taking these manufacturing jobs? Or are they making a life for themselves here with manufacturing?
We've had some great success stories of manufacturers being able to work closely with refugee resettlement agencies. One of the big concerns, usually when a manufacturer starts working with a resettlement agency, is always the language barrier.
Mm-hmm.
You have safety concerns, you have training concerns. If they do on-the-job training, how do you communicate? And we've seen success with translators. We've had companies who have entire shifts and entire lines that are 5 or 6 different languages, or that are one population, and they found a few people to operate as translators and managers to work with new refugees who are still learning English, and oftentimes don't even need to use English because they're working someplace where so many languages are spoken, and they've overcome the training gap with visual cues and with multiple languages when it comes to their safety structure and things of that nature. So they've seen a ton of success there, because you're building relationships with the community. And so you're looking at a community where people may live closely together. You're looking at an industry where they want to hire people who are going to come in and be excited to work together, and they can often, sort of build that through the resettlement agency to make sure that they're building that trust with these clients who are looking for work when they come into the country, or as they're here long term. So it's been a really great industry, as well as tourism and hospitality, to work with resettlement agencies to help people find work and find career and family sustaining wages that they can grow and they can be a part of their community.
Yeah, and in many cases, I don't know if it's still like this, but oftentimes your stay in the country, or there's a provision that you have to have a job. My father came here in 1958, and the provision was that his father had to have a job in order to even come over. It wasn't a refugee situation, but it was an immigration situation. So I'd imagine that being slotted, or if not slotted, connected to gainful employment is a necessity, but it also paves those inroads to them to become American.
Yeah, and I think in general, my experience, and I sat on the board for Journey's End for a few years. My experience is that, people generally want to work. They want to provide for their family. They want to do something. They want to volunteer. They want to be a part of their community.
Yeah.
They want to do something. And so
there's dignity in work.
Yeah, being able to find these opportunities, and it may not always be manufacturing. I tend to think manufacturing jobs are wonderful because, as opposed to a lot of other jobs, you are making something. You can see the value of what you've done that day. And there's always part of me that when I go on a tour or I'm going and doing something with our teams, it's nice to be able to see an outcome at the end. But I think it also, in general, being able to find a way to provide for your family and to be a part of your community is really important for people. And I think right now we're seeing that, yes, you have the economic implications of everything that's happening, and you have the economic implications for families and when it comes to healthcare and rent and all of those things. But you also have the mental health implications of people who are, losing their livelihoods and who are home and aren't able to go out and do things and aren't finding things. And what does that mean for their mental health and for, sort of the family structure that they have and what's happening in their lives, in addition to all of the economic implications that are around that. So what's really scary for me is that people are sort of losing a big part of who they are and what they do.
I can appreciate that, because the work you do or the way you occupy your time certainly is a very big part of your sense of self, your identity. So I guess, what are some of the success stories? Can you explain how you've maybe leverage technology to help these manufacturing outfits kind of rise to the occasion, employ more people, give them that opportunity?
Yeah, so a lot of our success recently has been specifically around safety and ergonomics. And so when I talk about automation, people they automatically go to, oh, well, that's going to get rid of all of these jobs because we're going to bring in these robots and things of that nature. And in most cases, what we're looking at are things that are taking pieces of work that people hate doing or that are ergonomically stressful. So an example, we had a company who needed to do a wire labeling on each piece of antenna that went out, and then it went into a bag, and a bag had to be stapled and sent out. And we were doing a floor tour, and this woman said the worst part is these bags because they stick, we never have the right size, you've got to find it, you got to get it open, you got to get this tiny little antenna in there. We're talking, and my engineer said, there's a solution here. Like, I have a solution, I got to go work on it. And came back, and there was an automated solution that she had to change the size of the bag and she had to program it, but all of the bagging and all of the annoying part of her job that she avoided and that took her a lot of time was out of the way, and she could focus on the parts of her job that were more exciting. I'm not going to say important because getting them in the bag and out was very important, but more exciting, less ergonomically stressful, and she was able to be more productive, meaning they were able to get more product out. Now we're looking at a lot of solutions when you think about the social distancing. You know, most of our manufacturers have been operating at a smaller staff over the last few weeks. A lot of them are still considered necessary employees, but they're operating at 50% capacity or lower, depending on the industry and what they do. And you're looking at how can we take something where people maybe were very close together and you had 10 people doing something and now you're operating at 5 people. Can you change your shifts and do you use lean principles and all of those things? But then also, where can automation and cobotics help spread some people out for safety and to keep people sort of in that social distancing and make sure that their floors are operatable and still functioning at the same productivity that you need to continue to be profitable and pay people. So we're looking at a lot of those types of things. Improving productivity, improving sort of quality of work is a big question, and we have a lot. So when we go out on floor tours, asking people, what part of your job does everyone hate doing? Asking managers, like, when you put somebody on a certain portion of this, where's the place everyone quits or everyone puts in a request for a transfer for? And then looking at why. Is it boring? Is it dangerous? And how can we augment that to make it something that can be more productive and take away some of those things using technology?
I can understand that there's a duality to it because people are probably protectionist of their own ability to make a wage, and to ask for help maybe kind of leads them to think that, I am going to be outmoded, I'm going to be replaced by a robot or something like that. But as you pointed out rightly, sometimes they're very dangerous. They're very precarious jobs that no human really has any business doing. And you can pay people more, but you can't grow back an arm, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't want to tar manufacturing, so I'm kidding.
Thank you.
Anybody who wants to know. So let's go a little bit more open-ended, or broad. What are your basic thoughts on the state of manufacturing and the supply chain in America? And in the very specific period of time right now. I think that the pandemic has exposed a few things, but I'm interested to know what your point of view is.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I think when this all first started, everyone had a lot of concerns around supply chain. We saw some major issues when it came to the PPE supply chain and inventories and things like that, with masks and face shields and ventilator supplies, and making sure that people had that, and there were stockpiles and there weren't. Where were they coming from? And thinking about transportation. When we actually talked to manufacturers, though, the interesting thing was a lot of their supply chains early on were not as impacted, and it seems to be a combination of inventory on hand and having some multiple supply chains. The concern is coming now, like 3 months down the line, of we're running out of what we have on hand to make new things. And each industry supply chain is different. So obviously we saw, medical devices and things of that nature being an issue and not being stockpiled and not having the ability to scale up. I would say on the mask side of things, you saw the manufacturing community really come together and say, okay, here's the capability I have. I don't generally make face shields. I'm thinking of a company in Jamestown Plastics. There's a great article. They don't make face shields. and they saw that there was a need, and they said, we have the capability to do that. Okay, get the specs and we'll make face shields, and we'll, sell those and send them out and get them out and make sure things are moving. We've had a couple of those stories where companies have been called and said, I know you have the ability to make this. If I send you the specs, can you convert over to make this? And being able to pivot and be nimble, I think, is really important. I think in the next few months, we're going to see more concerns, and it was already an issue prior to this, around raw goods and materials supply chain. As people use up their inventory, where are they coming from? What does that travel time look like? How can things travel and flow freely right now? All things considered, travel is, obviously limited to only necessary things, which these would be considered, but they're still limited and all of that. So really, I think our long tail effects on the supply chain for things like even consumer goods, you'll see in the next few months, especially for companies that have had to hit pause over the last few weeks or operate with a smaller skeleton crew. So they're only making the necessity, or they're making the minimum. They're not as productive as they have been. You'll start to see that come through in the next few months and even beyond. And I think in general, and you're hearing some of it rhetoric and some of it true right now, just concerns about, reshoring. How do we bring some of these manufacturing capabilities back into the country, just from a transportation standpoint, so we can get things and we can get things quickly and pivoted easily. It's been a conversation that's been happening for a while, and I think now having some of the issues we've had over the past 2 months, it's becoming a higher priority and a bigger conversation around just safety. And if we're fully dependent on other parts of the country and one part of our supply chain falls apart, what can we do and how can we operate and how can we protect ourselves when it comes to things like PPE and medical devices specifically. So I think you'll start to see more investment in reshoring and bringing some of that back into the country or into closer parts of the states. Specific states also struggled because they don't have as much of a manufacturing base and they're dependent on other parts of the country even. So how can we change that to make sure that we have a stable supply chain?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you called it rhetoric, because there's a kernel of truth in it, certainly, but I think that this stuff gets ginned up rhetorically. And what I mean is that people don't want to discuss the real implications of needing something and not being able to get it. And I personally don't like to talk politics. I don't want to get into it, but this is a presidential election year, and I feel like this is a salient issue, and I just wonder how it's realistically going to be discussed, because we know year after year, every candidate says we need to have jobs in America, and everybody's like, yeah, I agree. That's right. We really do need to have jobs in America, and yet it's people like you that are attempting to help make that a reality. And I don't know. I give you a lot of credit for working in logistics. There's rhetoric, and then there's getting things done. And getting things done saves people's lives, as we've seen over the last few months. And rhetoric it's just bumper stickers, and it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and I will say, reshoring and manufacturing is one of the few issues that I think generally both parties can agree on. In most cases, how they get there may look different, but the general understanding is we need to support the manufacturing industry, what that looks like, and what the manufacturing industry also needs to change when it comes to things like environmental issues and workforce issues. All a bigger part of the conversation, but in general, there is an understanding that we need to have a strong manufacturing base. We need to have a strong manufacturing presence, and that means that we need to support manufacturers, whether it be through economic development programs, through technology, through opportunities, all of those things, to make sure that they can stay and grow, and that we can stay competitive throughout the country and on a global scale, and that we can then have companies that can pivot when we will run into things like this and say, okay, we need to be able to manufacture this. What can we do? Companies can move pretty quickly and are pretty nimble. And we saw that over the beginning part of this. But then, there's always questions. I know with the ventilator thing, there were a lot of IP questions, and there were a lot of things out there, stories that were true and untrue. And I think in some cases it gives manufacturing kind of a bad name. And it's great to be able to tell the stories of people who said, look, this is what we have and this is what we can do. And yes, like they do need to pay for their materials and their time. And yes, they are selling things, but they're not the guy on Facebook who's trying to sell me a rogue weight bench for 500 times what he paid for it. They're just trying to keep their company going.
Right, exactly. Right. They're not a charity, and they're not engaging in price gouging, and they're not doing some sort of drop shipping scam in order to right. I get it.
Yeah, and I think just being able to tell some of those stories, there are always things out there. We've heard things about companies who in the beginning were gouging on hand sanitizer, and a lot of those were actually more individual people who went out in the beginning of all this and bought things up. But then you have great stories like Buffalo Distilling, who pivoted to making hand sanitizer, and now you can go buy, your vodka and hand sanitizer, which is really, I think, all you need for quarantine. You're good to go. So.
Okay, can I ask you what do you want to see as a result of this quarantine and pandemic response? What do you want the state of manufacturing to be in this country? Or even we can be as specific as the region or in general. What do you want? What changes do you want to occur as a result of this?
I'll start in general and then sort of work my way down. I think in general, I would like us to sort of rethink work and how we relate to work and productivity. I think from a non-manufacturing side, we've seen that most jobs can be done remotely. People need to be able to support, balancing their work and their family. I'd like to see some of that rethought, how we do that, how we support each other through those things, that maybe the typical clock in at 9 in your office till 6 in your office isn't sustainable for everyone and isn't what everyone needs to be doing. But also things like, does healthcare need to be tied to your employer and to work? How can we rethink healthcare? How can we rethink what that looks like? And be creative. When things are as bad as they are right now, you have an opportunity to be more creative and to really go for something big and make some huge changes. I hope that manufacturing succeeds in what they've been trying to do and bringing, more jobs and more productivity back into the United States and Canada, who's also been doing some great work around reshoring there. And being in Buffalo, we have the binational back and forth over the border there, and we want to be able to support them as well. And how can we bring that back into North America and into South America even, and talk about what does the supply chain look like and how can we support other countries? I'm not like everything's back in America, we're the best. But how can we build a...
Sorry, I get what you're saying, because you just couched your language, and I think a lot of us do that because we don't want to be seen as nationalistic. But I think that a certain economic protectionism, makes sense if a country is going to be fiscally solvent, or that if we're not going to keep spending into recessions, and that we can pay our taxes and everything else. So,
but if you look at our region, like specifically, we're so dependent as well on, Niagara Falls and our relationship with Canada and all of that. And it's an opportunity. And so some of that means like looking at what's the opportunity there and how can we work together. And I don't think, we're ever going to get the entirety of manufacturing supply chain back to where it once was. It's not the way of the world right now.
But I think doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah, you can't go back that far. But I think you can say, what can we reshore? How can we support our manufacturers here? There have been buy American and buy local initiatives for so long. And I think at the beginning of this, and now I'm going to go outside of just manufacturing, you saw people really rally around small businesses and say, okay, we're going to support small businesses. We're going to do the pickups, we're going to order online and all of that. And I think as we get further away from that initial piece, you're seeing more people go back to their usual online shopping and maybe not thinking about how do you support the small local businesses because it might feel like more work than just going to an Amazon or a big box.
You're so right. It's people will always go the path of least resistance, and how we've gotten to you can't support the mom and pop around the block. It's easier just to stay inside and order from Amazon fulfillment center. It's disheartening.
Yeah, and I think, buy local, yes, it involves manufacturing and reshoring, but it should also involve companies and small businesses around your neighborhood, and where can you walk to and how can you support them and what can you do, and just putting a little bit of extra thought and time into how you spend your money, and that's how you make your decisions. And I think we forget that it's very easy to get political on things and to talk about how you vote, but you vote with your wallet every day. You make a decision on what you're going to do when you spend your money. And does that mean that you're going to support, a small business and it may take you a day longer to get something, or you're going to support a slightly more expensive American-made product or something that's from somebody you can see? Or are you just going to click the first sort of thing that comes up on Amazon? And I think we're all guilty of it. I can't say that I'm like the best small business shopper. But
what you're talking about is it's real, and it's you're talking about civic engagement. You're talking about community support, like real community support that goes more so than putting a golf sign in your front lawn that says I'm Buffalo Strong. Anybody can do that sort of thing. It takes a little something extra to go and just be part of your community. I mean, we all live in our community, certainly, but do we all partake in it? And I think that's what you're talking about. I've been kind of obsessed with this old saying, spread the wealth. You've heard that, right? And I've always taken it as, oh yeah, just, you can't take it with you, so spread it around. But I've been re-examining it, and I think what it means is if you spread the wealth, then more people have. And when times are bad, maybe they can get through it. So for instance, in the city of Buffalo, people typically go to Wegmans or Tops or whatever, and they're fine grocery stores. But if you have other small businesses around you, like your grocers or bakeries or co-op or whatever it is, and you decide to give them a little bit of your money instead of just doing all your shopping in one place, you've spread that wealth. And now you've ensured that when the times get bad, guess what? They've been getting regular business from people, and they're going to be there for you. So spreading the wealth is a form of civic engagement. It's a form of civic duty. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, and it's interesting you brought up grocery stores, because when you think about, Wegmans and Tops and a lot of stores, and both of those, being more locally based, so they're not, Tops is a union grocery store, Wegmans is Rochester headquartered, even though they are larger.
Tops was a Dutch holding company for a while.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. But they are slightly more local than some options out there. We are lucky in that way here in Western New York. But they are both struggling with their meat supply chain, is a great example. And if you look at options like Moriarty Meats or some other local butchers,
Johnny's, Federal Meats,
you have some more options. If you look at a local CSA for your produce, yes, you may still need that may only supplement what you need, and you may need to make a trip, but a lot of them are doing delivery now and saving you those times. When you're in a time that you maybe don't want to go to 5 different stores, can you do pick up and delivery from a few different places and find some different options? Can you share with your neighbors? I think we're going to see a lot of times too of people kind of rethinking neighborhoods and communities. Do you need to be so isolated in your home with maybe one other person, or can you share things and share food and do errands for each other so that less people have to go out into the world? And right now, when we're trying to sort of avoid that, how much of that can we kind of take with us and build a safety net of, multiple generations, multiple people working together? And I think that also helps when you think about people that then don't have that option. If you have the luxury to order, from a local butcher that may be a little bit more expensive, you're leaving a chicken at Wegmans or Tops for somebody else when they're running low on something. And they said the same thing about people who were hoarding toilet paper in the beginning. If you hoard this because you can, you're making it so that other people can't get things when they need it. So if you can spend $2 more at a small local business, you might be saving that for someone else who can't afford that, or who doesn't have that opportunity or that luxury. And so how do you how do you balance those decisions and just put a little bit more thought into how you make those decisions?
Yeah, you're talking about balancing a smart procurement strategy with combating a poverty mindset,
Yeah.
that, oh yeah, I'm not going to go to Wegmans because everybody goes to Wegmans because it's going to be a madhouse. And I have my spots that I can go to. And because I haven't had any hardship procuring any meat or anything like that from my local supplier, and that's because they have different supply lines. And by spreading the wealth, you ensure that your local butcher shop or whatever it may be, that they have your business, and that when things go sideways, that they are still able to help you out. I mean, it's a credo that I've been living by now, is spread the wealth. And because I think about the future, and I don't want to buy everything from Amazon, and I don't want to buy everything from retailers with no relationship to me or no FaceTime. And that might sound quaint, that might sound whatever, old school and silly, but that's, I think what you had said about voting with your wallet makes perfect sense, and that's how I intend to operate.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's important for people to realize it's very easy to right now sort of get caught up in the political side of things, and it's important, and I want people to be engaged, and I want people to be active,
Sure.
and all of those things, but also thinking about the decisions that you make every day and where you spend your money, where you spend your time, especially right now, is really important for sustainability and for making those changes and supporting companies that, are small business, that support your values, that put money back in the community, that support local farms, that, I saw something the one day that was, you've asked this small business for donations for your kids raffle every year, and they've given you their gift card. Now's the time to kind of step up for them. And I think that's important to think about, and making sure that you're balancing that. Yes, you may not always have that opportunity or that luxury. They may not have everything that you need, but when can you make those decisions and sort of live in that way?
Yeah, and to be perfectly clear, when they say support us, they don't mean it as a charity. What they're saying is support us, and you're still getting a transaction. You're still getting the goods that you are paying for. It's just that you're getting them from somebody who is maybe going to appreciate the benefit of your dollars more so than Jeff Bezos. Just my line of thought. And again, what you had said about the political engagement, and people should be engaged, but if you think that casting a vote for president or your senator or whatever is the most important thing you can do in your political life, you're probably incorrect. To my mind, it's how you govern yourself first and foremost. I mean, have your opinions and obviously vote your conscience or vote your political mind, but you also have to go out there and comport yourself with the sort of attitude and morality and ethics that you want to see in the world, And if that means I want a robust economy in Western New York where my neighbors don't have to live in abject poverty or with the fear of ever looming unemployment, then maybe you have to decide where you're going to spend and what you're going to go with and without and what you're willing to endure. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that, voting, while essential, and everyone should go and vote for all levels of government, not just the president, research or school board votes, that a lot of the decisions you make, where you spend your time, where you spend your money, how you talk to people, how you treat people, those are all can and should be thought of as political acts. If you, really only think about politics as how you vote, you're missing huge levels of civic engagement that are important. And there's things that you can do that are very political, calling, letter writing, having conversations, donating to campaigns, all of those things. But then there's things that you do literally every day and think about, do you support a worker-owned union shop? Do you know where in your community are worker-owned co-ops, how people are paid, what people are doing, and do you spend your money there? Do you research how you spend your money? I read somewhere, and it was in regards to savings and spending money, that if you show me your bank statement, I'll show you what your values are. And it's true, not just in the case of, yes, know where things are going and how you're spending your money, and then also what is important to you. You know, do you spend your money on travel? Do you spend your money on your home and your family? Do you save everything? And how is that? And those are your values. And so does how you're spending your money, how you're spending your time, where you're giving your resources match with what you say and believe your values are?
Yeah, you're right. I think we're on the same page that it's your engagement, and I don't know if I would call everything a political act, but you're right. It is tantamount to a political act. I think that some people think that politics is arguing on social media, or that you're always angry about something. But I think that maybe realizing that you have more power than you think you do is a political act too. You know.
Yes.
Waiting for the street sweeper to come down your street, and it never does, versus picking up the litter because you decide that you're not going to live in a litter-strewn neighborhood it's, to my mind, a civic action, but it's certainly a political action too, depending on what you're willing to put up with and not. So I guess I'll just ask you, where can people find you online, Liz?
Oh gosh, so online. I'm on Twitter at BFLO_girl, so Buffalo Girl. I mostly tweet about my love of Grease 2 in Branson, Missouri.
I didn't know about the Branson, Missouri thing. I knew about Grease 2.
I just really want to get to Branson, and as soon as this is over and we're allowed to travel again, that's where I'm headed.
Is there anybody in particular that you're looking to see there?
No, but they have a really well-written travel website. Again, really fun at parties. So their Visit Buffalo Niagara, their travel bureau did this really great job on their website. And I was like, there's so much to do in Branson. Like, no one told me this. And I don't know how I ended up on this website, but I did.
They're like country music theater reviews and gambling, right?
There's a Ripley, believe it or not. There's a Duck Boat. There's a whole Dolly Parton thing.
I might steer clear of the Duck Boat after that.
I have heard bad things about the Duck Boat now. There's you're by the water. There's a Coney Island, Missouri, not far from there. So really, there's a lot to do. And I also appreciate a really well-made visitor bureau website. So I have to reward that by going to Branson. Just give me some good economic development copy, and I'm sold. And Instagram is the same. Buffalo_girl. So happy to engage and talk to people, and
Well, it has been my distinct pleasure to talk with you, Liz. I'm going to have you again because I'm fascinated by manufacturing. I'm fascinated by how these goods get in our hands, and I'd like to do a deeper dive sometime if you'd be amenable to it.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks again, Liz.
Thanks.
And that was my conversation with Liz Callahan. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram at BFLO_girl. You can find me online at Sciandra.com. Please join me again next week for another episode of the Saturday Night Special. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel for updates on new content. Until next time, take care of yourself.